A morning routine never changed. Black coffee, no sugar. Financial reports stacked in precise order on the left side of his desk. Schedule printed, highlighted, and color-coded by importance. Phone messages sorted by urgency. Everything executed with clockwork perfection. The same way it had been for the last 6 years, all orchestrated by hands that knew his preferences better than he did. Except today, those hands were shaking. I stood outside the mahogany doors of Zane Blackstone's corner office, palms damp with nervous sweat, clutching his coffee in one hand and my resignation letter in the other, the letter that would end everything. Through the frosted glass, his silhouette loomed, tall, commanding, utterly absorbed in whatever high-stakes deal had his attention this week. He had no idea that in 5 minutes, his perfectly ordered world was about to implode. The letter in my briefcase felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. 2 weeks' notice, professional and polite, giving no hint of the real reason I was leaving. How could I possibly explain that I was quitting because I was in love with him? Because 3 nights ago we had shared something beautiful and desperate and absolutely perfect, only for me to discover it meant nothing to him. Because I was pregnant with his children, twins, and I would rather raise them alone than watch him treat them like another business obligation. Maya, his voice carried through the intercom system, rich and commanding, even through the electronic filter. "Is my coffee ready?" "Coming, Mr. Blackstone," I replied, proud that my voice remained steady. I had been Zane's personal assistant for 6 years, ever since graduating from business school, with more student loans than job prospects. He had hired me despite my lack of experience, claiming he needed someone who could anticipate his needs and handle the demands of running a multi-billion-dollar empire. What he had gotten was a woman who fell in love with him a little more each day. For 6 years, I had watched him build Blackstone Industries from a successful company into a global powerhouse. I had seen him negotiate deals that lesser men would have found impossible, had witnessed the razor-sharp intelligence that could dissect complex problems in minutes, had been trusted with secrets that could topple governments. I had also seen the man beneath the corporate armor, the way he worried about his employees during layoffs, the anonymous donations he made to children's charities, the exhaustion that sometimes crept into his golden eyes when he thought no one was watching. Zane Blackstone was brilliant, powerful, devastatingly handsome, and completely out of my league. He was also a werewolf alpha, though he kept that part of his nature carefully hidden in the human corporate world. And 3 nights ago, when grief over his father's death had finally broken through his legendary self-control, I had been the one he turned to for comfort. It should have been the happiest night of my life. Instead, it was the beginning of the end. I pushed open the office doors and crossed the marble floor with practiced silence, setting his coffee on the exact spot where he expected it to be. Zane didn't look up from the financial reports he was reviewing, his dark hair falling across his forehead as he concentrated on the numbers that would determine whether a small tech company lived or died. "The Morrison contract needs your signature," I said, placing the folder beside his coffee. "Legal made the changes you requested, and their board has approved the new terms." "Good." He signed without reading, trusting my judgment implicitly. "What's the status of the Vancouver acquisition?" "Their CEO wants to meet next week. I've cleared your schedule for Thursday and Friday. Cancel Thursday." I want to wrap this up quickly. He finally looked up, those golden eyes that had haunted my dreams focusing on me with laser intensity. "Are you feeling all right? You look pale." The concern in his voice made my chest tighten with familiar longing. Even now, even knowing what I knew, part of me wanted to tell him everything, to confess that I loved him, that I was carrying his children, that the past 3 days had been the most agonizing of my life. Instead, I smiled the professional smile I had perfected over 6 years of hiding my feelings. "I'm fine, Mr. Blackstone, just tired. You've been working too hard," he said, his expression softening slightly. "Take the afternoon off, that's in order." If only he knew that my exhaustion had nothing to do with work, and everything to do with spending 72 hours crying over a man who would never love me back. Actually, I said, my hand moving unconsciously to the briefcase that contained my resignation letter. There's something I need to discuss with you. Can it wait? I have the board meeting in an hour, and I need to review the quarterly projections. The casual dismissal shouldn't have hurt. I had heard it 1,000 times before when business took priority over personal matters. But today, with my heart already shattered and my future uncertain, it felt like the final nail in a coffin I had been building for years. Of course, I said quietly, it can wait. But it couldn't wait, and we both knew it. Some conversations couldn't be postponed indefinitely, no matter how much we might want to avoid them. As I left his office and returned to my desk in the outer reception area, I caught my reflection in the window that overlooked downtown Seattle. 28 years old, successful by most measures, and about to throw it all away for a love that had never been returned. The smart thing would be to stay, to accept that our night together had been in the stake. To continue being his perfect assistant while raising his children in secret. I could afford excellent childcare with my salary, could build a life that included him peripherally while protecting my heart from further damage. But I couldn't spend the rest of my life loving a man who saw me as nothing more than efficient help. So tonight, I would submit my resignation. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of disappearing from Zane Blackstone's life forever, taking his unborn children with me. He would never know what he had lost because I would never give him the chance to reject us. Some secrets were too important to share with men who didn't understand their value. Chapter 1. 6 Years of Hidden Love. My morning alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., just like it had every weekday for the past 6 years. By 6:15, I was dressed in one of my carefully chosen professional outfits. Today, a navy blue suit that was expensive enough to fit in at Blackstone Industries, but conservative enough not to draw unwanted attention. By 6:45, I was in my car, navigating Seattle traffic toward the gleaming downtown tower that housed one of the most powerful corporations on the West Coast. By 7:30, I was at my desk outside Zane's office, reviewing his schedule and preparing for another day of being indispensable to a man who barely noticed I existed as anything more than an extension of his business empire. "Morning, Maya," called Jessica from accounting as she hurried past my desk with an armload of files. "How was your weekend?" "Quiet," I replied, which was true. Most of my weekends were quiet, spent catching up on work I couldn't finish during the week, or reading romance novels that featured the kind of love I would never have in real life. "You need to get out more," Jessica said with a grin. "There's a whole world of eligible men out there who would love to date someone as brilliant and beautiful as you." If only she knew that the only man I wanted was 40 feet away, behind mahogany doors, probably already deep in the kind of high-stakes business negotiations that had made him one of the youngest billionaires in the country. "I'm perfectly content with my quiet weekends," I said diplomatically. "That's what you always say." Jessica shook her head in mock despair. "Promise me you'll at least think about coming to the company Christmas party this year. It's at the Fairmont, and rumor has it Mr. Blackstone might actually make an appearance." The mention of Zane attending a social function was enough to make my heart skip a beat, despite my best efforts to remain professional. In 6 years, he had attended exactly 3 company events, and each time I had spent the entire evening trying not to stare at how devastating he looked in a tuxedo. "I'll think about it," I said, which was what I always said about social events I had no intention of attending. "You'd better. I'm not taking no for an answer this time." After Jessica left, I settled into the familiar rhythm of managing Zane's professional life. Phone calls from investors who wanted to pitch their latest ventures, meeting requests from CEOs who thought they were important enough to demand his personal attention, contract negotiations that required his review and approval. I fielded them all with the efficiency that had made me invaluable to him, protecting his time and energy for the decisions that actually mattered. At 9:15, the elevator doors opened and Zane strode into the reception area like he owned the world, which in many ways he did. Tall and commanding, in his perfectly tailored charcoal suit, he moved with the kind of predatory grace that came from being a werewolf alpha. Though the human employees had no idea their CEO was anything more than an exceptionally successful businessman. "Good morning, Mr. Blackstone," I said, falling into step beside him as he headed toward his office. "Your 9:30 with the Morrison Group confirmed. The Vancouver team sent over their revised projections. And your brother called to remind you about dinner Thursday." "Can't Thursday dinner," he said without slowing down. "The Vancouver deal is more important than Marcus's social schedule." I made a note in my tablet while simultaneously opening his office door and following him inside. "I'll let him know. Also, legal needs your signature on the Henderson contract, and the board wants to discuss the European expansion timeline. Schedule the board meeting for next week. I want those Vancouver projections analyzed first." He settled behind his desk and immediately reached for the coffee I had prepared exactly the way he liked it. Strong black with just a hint of sugar. For 6 years, this had been our morning routine. I anticipated his needs, managed his schedule, and made sure his complicated life ran smoothly while he focused on building his empire. I was the perfect assistant, efficient, discreet, completely dedicated to his success. I was also hopelessly, desperately in love with him, and he had no idea. "Maya," he said, looking up from the contracts I had placed on his desk. "Have you eaten today?" The unexpected question caught me off guard. "I'm sorry." "Breakfast? Have you had breakfast?" His golden eyes studied my face with the kind of attention that made my pulse quicken. "You've been working late every night this week, and I know you tend to skip meals when you're busy." The fact that he had noticed my schedule, that he cared enough to ask about my well-being, made my chest tight with familiar longing. "I had coffee," I said, which was technically true. "Coffee isn't breakfast." He reached for his phone. "I'm having something sent up from that cafe you like. The one with the ridiculously complicated pastries." "Mr. Blackstone, you don't need to." "It's not negotiable," he interrupted, already dialing. "You can't take care of my schedule if you're not taking care of yourself." As he placed the order, remembering exactly what I liked without asking, I found myself staring at the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, at the strong line of his jaw, at the hands that could sign contracts worth millions of dollars, or apparently order breakfast for an assistant who worked too hard. "Is there something else?" he asked, noticing my continued presence. "No," I said quickly, heat flooding my cheeks at being caught staring. "I'll just go confirm your afternoon appointments, Maya." His voice stopped me at the door. "Thank you for everything you do. I know I don't say it often enough, but this company would collapse without you." The sincere gratitude in his voice was almost worse than indifference would have been. It reminded me that he valued me, just not in the way I desperately wanted him to. "You're welcome, Mr. Blackstone," I said softly, then escaped to the safety of my desk before I could do something embarrassing, like confess my feelings or start crying. 20 minutes later, a delivery arrived from the cafe. Not just the almond croissant I had mentioned liking once, but an entire breakfast spread that could have fed 3 people. When I tried to protest the extravagance, Zane simply said, "Share it with someone if it's too much. But eat something, that's an order." As I nibbled on the perfectly flaky pastry and watched him through his office window, lost in concentration as he reviewed financial reports, I allowed myself a moment of pure fantasy. What would it be like to be more than his assistant? To be the woman he came home to at night, who shared his meals and his bed and his secrets. The fantasy was interrupted by my phone buzzing with a text from my sister, Rose. "Still planning to die alone at your desk. It's not too late to quit and find a man who actually notices you exist." Rose had been encouraging me to leave Blackstone Industries for years, convinced that I was wasting my life on an unrequited crush. She wasn't wrong. But she also didn't understand that some loves were worth the pain they caused. Or at least that's what I had thought, until 3 nights ago changed everything. The memory of that night crashed over me like a wave. Zane's father's funeral. The rare vulnerability I had seen in his eyes. The way he had looked at me like I was the only thing keeping him anchored to the world. "I can't do this anymore," he had said, his voice breaking in a way I had never heard before. "I can't keep pretending I'm strong enough to handle everything alone." And for one perfect impossible night, I had been the one he turned to. Not his board of directors, not his wealthy friends, not the sophisticated women who moved in his social circles. Me. The memory of his hands in my hair, his mouth against mine, the way he had whispered my name like a prayer. It was beautiful and devastating, and completely unsustainable, because the next morning he had gone back to treating me like his efficient assistant. And I had overheard him telling his brother that our night together had been a moment of weakness he deeply regretted. I pushed the painful memory aside and focused on my work. Whatever had happened between us, whatever I had hoped it might mean, was irrelevant now. I had a job to do, at least for the next 2 weeks. After that, Maya Rodriguez would disappear from Zane Blackstone's life forever, taking his unborn children with her. Chapter 2. The night everything changed. 3 nights earlier, the funeral had been everything Zane's father would have hated. Elaborate, expensive, filled with business associates who cared more about networking than grief. I had organized every detail according to Zane's specifications, from the flower arrangements to the catered reception. But I could see the tension building in his shoulders as the day wore on. Richard Blackstone had been many things. A demanding father, a ruthless businessman, a complicated man who had built an empire while struggling with his own demons. But he had also been the only family Zane had left besides his brother Marcus. And losing him had shaken Zane in ways that his usual stoic control couldn't quite hide. By the time the last mourners had left the reception, Zane looked like he was holding himself together through sheer willpower. I had dismissed the catering staff, handled the final arrangements with the funeral home, and was gathering my things to leave when I heard glass shatter from his office. I found him standing behind his desk, his hand bleeding from the whiskey tumbler he had apparently thrown against the wall. His suit jacket was gone, his tie loosened, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled, as if he had been running his hands through it. "Mr. Blackstone," I said quietly, "are you all right?" He looked up at me with eyes that held so much pain it made my chest ache. "My father is dead," he said simply, "and all I can think about is how we never had a single conversation that wasn't about business or disappointment." I moved closer, pulling a first aid kit from the cabinet where I kept supplies for minor office emergencies. "Let me see your hand." "Maya, you don't need to." "Yes, I do." I took his injured hand in mine, carefully examining the cuts from the broken glass. "This needs to be cleaned." As I gently cleaned the wounds and applied antiseptic, I was acutely aware of how close we were standing, of the way he was watching my face as I worked. In 6 years, we had never touched beyond the occasional handshake or accidental brush of fingers when passing documents. Documents. He never approved of anything I did, Zane said quietly. The company, my methods, my priorities. Right up until the end, he was convinced I was too ruthless, too focused on profit over people. "Maybe he was proud of you in ways he couldn't express," I said, securing a bandage around his palm. "Some people aren't good at showing their feelings." "Are you speaking from experience?" The question made me look up, and I found myself caught in his golden gaze. For a moment, the careful, professional distance we maintained seemed to evaporate, leaving just a man and a woman standing too close together in an empty office. "Everyone has feelings they don't know how to express," I said softly. "What about you, Maya?" He reached up with his uninjured hand to brush a strand of hair from my face. The gesture, so tender, it made my breath catch. "What feelings are you hiding?" I should have stepped back. Should have deflected with a professional comment about getting late and needing to go home. Should have maintained the boundaries that had kept my heart safe for 6 years. Instead, I found myself leaning into his touch, my eyes fluttering closed as his thumb traced across my cheek. "Too many to count," I whispered. That's when he kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate, hungry, full of 6 years of unspoken tension and the grief that had finally broken through his legendary control. I melted into him immediately, my hands fisting in his shirt as I kissed him back with all the love I had been hiding for so long. "Maya." He breathed against my lips, my name carrying a note of wonder and need that sent shivers down my spine. "I know," I said, because I did know. I knew this was dangerous, knew it would complicate everything, knew it might destroy the careful life I had built around my unrequited feelings. I also knew that I loved him with every fiber of my being, and if he needed me tonight, I would give him anything he asked for. What followed was the most beautiful night of my life. My chest tight with a combination of embarrassment and growing dread. What had felt like a revelation last night suddenly seemed like a terrible mistake in the cold light of morning. That feeling was confirmed when I returned to the office the next day and overheard Zane talking to his brother Marcus on the phone. It was a mistake, he was saying, his voice carrying clearly through his partially open office door. A moment of weakness when I wasn't thinking clearly. "It can't happen again." "Are you sure about that?" Marcus asked. Because from where I'm standing, it looked like exactly what it was. Zane interrupted sharply. A lapse in judgment that I deeply regret. "Maya is an excellent assistant, and I won't complicate our working relationship with personal entanglements. Personal entanglements, as if the most beautiful night of my life had been nothing more than an inconvenience to him." I managed to make it to the bathroom before I started crying, locking myself in a stall and sobbing as quietly as possible while my heart shattered into a million pieces. For 6 years, I had wondered what it would be like to have Zane's attention, his touch, his love. Now I knew, and I also knew it meant nothing to him. The rest of that day passed in a haze of professional efficiency. I answered his calls, managed his schedule, and handled his correspondence while dying inside. He treated me exactly as he always had, polite, appreciative of my work, completely oblivious to the fact that he had just destroyed me. That night, I went home to my small apartment and stared at the ceiling until dawn, trying to figure out how to go back to being his assistant after what we had shared. How to pretend that I didn't love him, that his touch hadn't branded itself on my skin, that his whispered endearments hadn't made me believe in possibilities that didn't exist. 2 days later, I missed my period. 3 pregnancy tests and 1 doctor's appointment. Later, I had my answer. I was carrying Zane Blackstone's children, twins, according to the ultrasound. The products of one perfect night with a man who considered our intimacy a regrettable mistake. I spent that entire evening sitting on my bathroom floor, staring at the ultrasound images and trying to figure out what to do. I could tell him he deserved to know he was going to be a father, but I had heard the regret in his voice, had seen how quickly he had returned to treating me like a professional convenience. What would happen when he learned about the babies? Would he offer to support them financially while making it clear that their existence was just another problem to be managed? Would he insist on a custody arrangement that gave him access to his heirs while keeping me at arm's length? I couldn't bear the thought of spending the next 18 years loving a man who saw me as nothing more than the mother of his children. Couldn't stand the idea of watching him find someone worthy of his love while I remained in the background, raising his babies and pretending my heart wasn't breaking every day. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I was going to disappear. Not immediately. That would be too suspicious. But I would submit my resignation, serve out my notice, and then vanish from Zane's life completely. I would raise our children far from Seattle. far from the corporate world where he ruled like a king. They would know they were loved, even if they never knew their father. It wasn't the ending I had dreamed of during 6 years of secret love, but it was the only one that would let me keep what remained of my dignity and my heart. The resignation letter was already written, sitting in my briefcase like a time bomb, waiting to explode. Tomorrow, I would hand it to him and begin the process of saying goodbye to the only man I had ever loved. Tonight, I would allow myself one last night of remembering what it felt like to be in his arms, to believe that love could conquer anything, to hope that fairy tales sometimes came true. Tomorrow, I would start learning how to live without him. Some dreams were too beautiful to survive contact with reality. Chapter 3. The Moment of Truth. The resignation letter felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I carried it into Zane's office the next morning. I had rewritten it 3 times, trying to find the right balance between professional courtesy and emotional distance. In the end, I had settled on simple, straightforward language that gave no hint of the real reason I was leaving. "Your coffee, Mr. Blackstone," I said, setting his usual morning cup on his desk, alongside the folder containing contracts that needed his review. "Thank you." He looked up from his laptop, and for a moment, I thought I saw something softer in his expression, a flicker of the tenderness he had shown me that night in his office. But it was gone so quickly, I might have imagined it. "There's also something else," I said, my hand moving to the briefcase where my resignation was waiting. "Something we need to discuss." "Can it wait until after the Morrison meeting?" he asked, already turning his attention back to his screen. "I want to review their latest proposal before we sit down with them." The casual dismissal shouldn't have hurt. I had heard it countless times before, when business took priority over personal matters. But today, with my entire future hanging in the balance, it felt like a knife to the chest. "Of course," I managed. "It can wait." But as I turned to leave his office, I heard voices in the reception area that made my blood run cold. Zane's brother Marcus was talking to someone. A woman whose voice I didn't recognize, but whose tone carried the kind of sophisticated confidence that came from money and breeding. "Told him the board meeting was completely unnecessary," the woman was saying as I emerged from Zane's office. "If he would just delegate more responsibility to capable people, he wouldn't need to micromanage every decision." I found myself face to face with a stunning brunette in a designer suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. She was exactly the type of woman who belonged in Zane's world. Polished, educated, comfortable with wealth and power in ways I would never be. "Maya," Marcus said, noticing my arrival. "This is Veronica Ashford, an old friend of the family." "Veronica, this is Maya Rodriguez, Zane's assistant." "Ah, the famous Maya," Veronica said, her smile sharp as a blade. "Zane speaks of you constantly. His perfect assistant who anticipates his every need." The way she said "perfect assistant" made it clear that she considered me exactly that. Help, not competition. It shouldn't have bothered me, since that's exactly what I was. But something about her tone made my wolf bristle defensively. "Miss Ashford," I said politely. "How nice to meet you." "Veronica was just telling me about the charity gala next month," Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to the undercurrents flowing between us. "The one where she and Zane will be co-chairing the fundraising committee. It's such important work," Veronica said, her voice carrying the kind of practiced concern that came from years of involvement in high society causes. "And Zane is so passionate about helping underprivileged children. It's one of the things I've always admired about him." The casual intimacy in her voice, the suggestion that she knew things about Zane's passions and interests, made my chest tighten with jealousy. This was clearly someone who moved in his social circles, who understood his world in ways I never could. "I should let him know you're here," I said, reaching for the intercom. "Actually," Marcus interrupted, "why don't you just knock?" I think he's between calls right now. I moved toward Zane's office door, but it was slightly ajar, and voices from inside made me pause. Zane was on the phone, his voice carrying clearly through the crack. "Can't keep making excuses forever," he was saying. "The board is getting suspicious about why I keep turning down merger opportunities with established pack businesses. Maybe because you're too stubborn to admit you need help," came the reply from his speakerphone. Another voice I recognized as belonging to David Chen, one of his business partners. "The Ashford Corporation deal would give you access to their distribution networks across the entire Pacific Northwest. The Ashford deal comes with complications I'm not prepared to handle," Zane replied firmly. "You mean it comes with Veronica Ashford, who's been trying to get back together with you for the past 2 years?" David said with obvious amusement. "She's beautiful. She's connected. She understands our world." "What exactly is the problem?" "The problem is that I'm not interested in mixing business with personal relationships again," Zane said, his voice taking on the kind of cold authority that ended discussions. "Not after what happened with Maya." My blood turned to ice as I realized what I was hearing. They were talking about me, about that night in his office, about the complications I represented to his business empire. "Speaking of Maya," David continued, apparently unaware that the subject of their conversation was standing just outside the door. "How are you handling that situation? Because from what Marcus told me, you've been walking around like a man with a guilty conscience ever since Richard's funeral." "There's nothing to handle," Zane said sharply. "It was a moment of weakness when I wasn't thinking clearly. A mistake that won't be repeated." The word mistake hit me like a physical blow, even though I had heard him say it before. But hearing it discussed casually with his business associates, hearing my night of perfect love reduced to an inconvenience he needed to manage, made something inside my chest crack and bleed. "You sure about that?" David asked. "Because the way you've been looking at her lately, the way I've been looking at her is irrelevant?" Zane interrupted coldly. "Maya is an excellent assistant, and I won't jeopardize that professional relationship with personal complications." What happened between us was a lapse in judgment that I deeply regret. Regret was even worse than mistake. At least a mistake could be forgiven, learned from, accepted as part of human fallibility. Regret implied that he wished it had never happened at all. I stumbled backward from the door, my hand pressed to my mouth to stop the sob that was building in my throat. Behind me, I could hear Veronica and Marcus still talking, but their voices seemed to come from very far away. "Maya." Marcus's voice carried a note of consolation. Marcus's voice carried a note of concern. "Are you all right?" "Fine," I managed, though my voice sounded strange even to my own ears. I need to step out for a moment." I made it to the bathroom before the tears started, locking myself in the far stall and sobbing as quietly as possible, while my heart shattered all over again. It was one thing to know that Zane regretted our night together. It was another thing entirely to hear him discuss it with other people, like it was a business problem that needed to be solved. When I finally managed to compose myself enough to return to my desk, I found Veronica sitting in the chair across from it, studying me with calculating eyes. "You know," she said conversationally, "I've always wondered what it would be like to work so closely with someone like Zane. It must be challenging being exposed to his personal life while maintaining professional boundaries." "I'm very good at my job," I said carefully, settling into my chair and trying to look busy with paperwork. "Oh, I'm sure you are. Zane wouldn't keep you around if you weren't competent." She paused meaningfully. "But I imagine it takes a special kind of person to handle the complications that come with working for such a powerful man." The way she said complications made it clear that she suspected something had happened between Zane and me. Perhaps she had seen something in our body language. Or maybe Marcus had said more than he should have. "I handle whatever Mr. Blackstone requires," I said diplomatically. "I'm sure you do." Veronica's smile was razor-sharp. "But you should know that Zane and I have a history that goes back much further than any professional relationship. We understand each other in ways that transcend business partnerships." The territorial claim was subtle but unmistakable. She was marking her territory, letting me know that whatever I thought I meant to Zane, I was wrong. "Ms. Ashford," I said quietly, "I think there may be some misunderstanding about—" "There's no misunderstanding," she interrupted smoothly. "I know exactly what you are to Zane, and more importantly, what you're not. Your help, Maya, very good help, but still just an employee who can be replaced if necessary." The cruelty of the statement took my breath away, especially coming so soon after overhearing Zane's casual dismissal of our intimacy. But before I could respond, Zane's office door opened and he emerged with Marcus, both men laughing about something that had apparently amused them. "Veronica," Zane said, his voice warming in a way that made my chest ache. "I didn't realize you were here. I was hoping to steal you away for lunch," she said, rising gracefully from her chair. "We have so much to discuss about the gala, and I thought it would be nice to catch up." "I have meetings until 3, Zane replied, but his tone suggested he was considering the invitation. "Then dinner," Veronica said immediately. "That little place you used to love, the one with the impossible wine list." The casual reference to shared history, to intimate knowledge of his preferences, made my stomach twist with jealousy. This was what belonged in his world. Sophisticated women who understood his social obligations and could match his wealth and status. "I'll have Maya check my schedule," Zane said, turning toward my desk. "Actually," I said, standing up so quickly that my chair rolled backward, "I need to speak with you now. It's important." Something in my voice must have conveyed the urgency I felt, because Zane's expression immediately became serious. "Of course, Veronica, would you excuse us?" Naturally, her smile didn't reach her eyes as she gathered her purse. "I'll call you later about dinner." Once she and Marcus had left, Zane gestured toward his office. "What's wrong? You look upset." I followed him inside and closed the door behind us, my hands shaking as I reached for my briefcase. This was it. The moment that would end everything between us, the conversation that would set me free to disappear from his life forever. "Mr. Blackstone," I began, then stopped. The formal address sounded wrong after what we had shared, but I couldn't bring myself to use his first name. Not when I was about to walk away from him forever. "Zane," he said quietly. "When we're alone, you can call me Zane." The gentle correction almost undid me. For 6 years, I had been Maya, and he had been Mr. Blackstone. The professional distance, a necessary barrier between my feelings and his indifference. Hearing him offer that small intimacy now felt like both a gift and a cruelty. "Zane," I said, testing his name on my lips one last time. "I need to give you this." I pulled the resignation letter from my briefcase and held it out to him, my hand steady, despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. He stared at the envelope for a long moment without taking it. "What is this?" "My resignation." 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. The words seemed to hit him like a physical blow. He took the letter, but didn't open it, his golden eyes searching my face with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Why?" he asked simply. The question I had been dreading, the one I had no good answer for. I couldn't tell him the truth. That I loved him. That our night together had meant everything to me. That hearing him call it a mistake had destroyed something inside me that could never be repaired. I couldn't tell him about the babies growing inside me, the children who would never know their father because I refused to be a complication in his perfectly ordered life. "I've been offered another position," I said, the lie tasting like ashes in my mouth. "Better opportunities, more responsibility." "Where?" "A small firm. You probably haven't heard of them." "Maya." He moved closer, and I caught the familiar scent that had haunted my dreams. Expensive cologne, mixed with something uniquely him. "Talk to me. What's really going on?" The concern in his voice, the way he was looking at me like I actually mattered to him, made it almost impossible to maintain my composure. But I had heard him talking to David, had listened to him reduce our beautiful night to a regrettable lapse in judgment. "I think it's time for me to move on," I said carefully. 6 years is a long time to stay in any position. I need new challenges. "I can give you new challenges," he said immediately. "A promotion, a raise, whatever you need. Maya, you're invaluable to this company, to me. As an assistant," I said quietly. "As much more than that." He reached out as if to touch my face, then let his hand drop. "You know, you mean more to me than just professional efficiency." "Do I?" The question came out sharper than I intended, colored by all the pain and disappointment I was trying so hard to hide. "Because from where I'm standing, it seems like I'm exactly what everyone says I am. Very good help that can be replaced when necessary." His expression changed, confusion and something that looked like hurt flashing across his features. "Who said that to you?" "It doesn't matter." I took a step back, needing distance from his presence, before I did something stupid, like confess everything. "The point is, they're right. I'm your assistant, Zane. That's all I've ever been, and that's all I'll ever be." "That's not true, isn't it?" I met his eyes directly, letting him see some of the pain I had been hiding. "Because 3 days ago, something happened between us. Something that meant everything to me. And since then, you've treated me exactly the same as you always have, politely, professionally, like nothing changed at all." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see him struggling with something, emotions warring across his features as he processed my words. "Maya," he said finally, his voice rough with something I couldn't identify. "That night was a mistake. I finish. For him, using his own words like weapons. A moment of weakness you deeply regret. Yes, I heard you tell David exactly how you feel about what happened between us." His face went white. "You heard, when does it matter? The point is, I know where I stand. I know what I am to you and what I'm not." I lifted my chin, trying to project more confidence than I felt. "So, I'm making this easy for both of us. I'm leaving." "You can't leave," he said, and for a moment, his alpha authority bled through his human facade. "Maya, I won't accept your resignation." "You don't have a choice," I replied. "I'm not asking for permission, Zane. I'm giving you professional courtesy by providing notice." "What if I said I need you?" The question was barely above a whisper, but it hit me like a shout. For a moment, hope flared in my chest, like a candle in the dark. But then I remembered Veronica's casual intimacy, David's amusement about Zane's complications. Meadow, the way he had discussed our night, like it was a business problem to be managed. "You need an assistant," I said quietly, "and I'm sure you'll find an excellent replacement." He stared at me for a long moment, his golden eyes holding emotions I couldn't read. Then his expression shuddered, returning to the professional mask I knew so well. "If that's what you want," he said formally, "I'll have HR process your departure." "Thank you. 2 weeks seems unnecessary," he continued, his voice growing colder with each word. "If you're eager to start your new position, I can have your replacement here by Monday." The dismissal was swift and brutal, exactly what I should have expected from a man who had built an empire on quick decisions and efficient solutions. But it still hurt more than I had anticipated. "That would be fine," I managed. "Good." He moved to his desk and pressed the intercom button. "Marcus, can you come in here for a moment?" His brother appeared within seconds, his expression curious as he took in the tension crackling between us. "Maya has decided to pursue other opportunities," Zane said without preamble. "Can you handle the transition arrangements?" "Of course," Marcus said, though his eyes kept moving between us, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "Maya, I'm sorry to see you go. Any chance we can convince you to change your mind?" "No," I said quickly. "But thank you. It's been an honor working here." As I gathered my personal belongings from my desk, 6 years of carefully accumulated possessions that somehow fit into a single cardboard box. I felt like I was dismantling my entire life, piece by piece. The photo of my family from my college graduation, the small succulent plant that had somehow thrived under fluorescent lighting, the coffee mug that said, "World's Best Assistant," that Marcus had given me as a joke. Each item represented a moment, a memory, a piece of the life I had built around loving a man who would never love me. "Back, Maya." Zane's voice made me look up from the box I was packing. He stood in his office doorway, his expression unreadable. "I want you to know whatever you heard me say to David, whatever you think about that night, it's more complicated than you realize." Complicated. How? For a moment, I thought he might actually explain, might tell me something that would change the equation, that would make sense of the pain and confusion that had been eating at me for days. Instead, he shook his head. "It doesn't matter now. I wish you the best in your new position." The formal dismissal was final, absolute. Whatever he had been about to say, whatever complications he had been referring to, he had decided they weren't worth sharing. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything." An hour later, I walked out of Blackstone Industries for the last time, carrying my box of memories and the secret that would change both our lives forever. As the elevator doors closed behind me, I caught a glimpse of Zane standing at his office window, watching me leave. For a moment, our eyes met through the glass, and I saw something in his expression that looked almost like regret. But the doors closed before I could be sure. And by the time I reached the parking garage, I had convinced myself I had imagined it. That night, I booked a flight to Montana under my maiden name and began the process of disappearing from Zane Blackstone's life forever. Some love stories ended with grand gestures and declarations of eternal devotion. Others ended with a resignation letter and a one-way plane ticket to somewhere no one would think to look. Mine was definitely the second kind. Chapter 4. Starting over. 4 years later, the mountain air in Glacier Falls, Montana, was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine trees and fresh snow, even in early autumn. As I walked my 4-year-old daughters to their first day of preschool, I marveled at how different my life had become from the corporate world I had left behind in Seattle. "Mama, do I have to go to school?" Elena asked, clinging to my hand with the stubborn determination she had inherited from her father. "Can't I just stay home and help you with the plants?" "School will be fun," I assured her, adjusting the small backpack that made her look impossibly tiny. "You'll learn new things and make new friends." "But what if the other kids don't like us?" Sophia added, her golden eyes, so much like Zay's, wide with worry. "What if they think we're weird?" My heart clenched at the insecurity in her voice. Both girls had inherited their father's supernatural traits along with his distinctive eye color. And while most of the residents of Glacier Falls were werewolves who understood such things, the girls were still young enough to sense when they were different. "You're not weird," I said firmly, kneeling down to their level. "You're special. And anyone who gets to know you will see how amazing you are." The truth was, Ella Lenina and Sophia were extraordinary children, bright, curious, and surprisingly mature for their age. Ella Lenina had inherited Zane's analytical mind and natural leadership abilities, while Sophia possessed an empathy and intuition that reminded me of my own healing gifts. Watching them grow over the past 4 years had been both the greatest joy and the deepest heartbreak of my life. Every day, I saw more of their father in them. The way Elena tilted her head when she was thinking hard about something. The way Sophia's eyes sparkled with mischief when she was planning some elaborate game. The stubborn independence they both displayed when they thought they were right about something. They asked about their father sometimes in the casual way children do when they're trying to understand their place in the world. I had told them that Daddy lived far away and couldn't visit, which was true as far as it went. They had never pressed for more details. perhaps sensing that the subject caused me pain. "Mrs. Rodriguez," called a familiar voice as we approached the small schoolhouse that served Glacier Falls' youngest residents. I turned to see Sarah Chen, one of the other mothers and the closest thing I had to a friend in our small community. Her son, Danny, was Elena's age, and the two had become inseparable over the summer. "How are you holding up?" Sarah asked, falling into step beside us. First day of school is always hard on the parents. "I'm fine," I said automatically. The same response I had given to every expression of concern for the past 4 years. "Just want to make sure they settle in well." "They'll be perfect," Sarah assured me. "Miss Rodriguez has a gift with children, and the other kids will love having them in class." It was still strange being called Ms. Rodriguez instead of Maya. When I had arrived in Glacier Falls 4 years ago, pregnant and desperate to disappear, I had reverted to my maiden name and created a simple backstory. A widow whose husband had died in a car accident, leaving her to raise their children alone. The werewolf community in Glacier Falls had accepted me without question, perhaps recognizing a fellow wolf in need of sanctuary. I had found work as a substitute teacher, and when the children were old enough, had started a small business growing and selling medicinal herbs that drew on my supernatural healing abilities. It wasn't the life I had planned, but it was peaceful and safe, and my daughters were happy. That had to be enough. "Mama," Elena said as we reached the school's front steps, "you'll pick us up after school, right?" "Of course I will," I promised, kissing the top of her dark head. "I'll be waiting right here when you're ready to come home." As I watched my daughters disappear into the schoolhouse with the other children, I felt the familiar pang of loneliness that had become my constant companion. 4 years of single motherhood had taught me that I was stronger than I had ever imagined, but they had also confirmed what I had always known. Some kinds of love left holes that could never be filled by anything else. "Coffee," Sarah suggested, linking her arm through mine. "I know a place that serves excellent scones and doesn't judge mothers who cry a little on the first day of school." "I'm not crying," I protested, though I could feel moisture gathering in my eyes. "Of course not, neither am I. We're just emotionally overwhelmed by the beauty of the autumn landscape." I laughed despite myself. Sarah had a gift for making even the most difficult moments feel manageable, which was probably why she had become such an important part of our lives. As we settled into a corner booth at the local cafe, I tried to focus on the conversation flowing around us. Local gossip about harvest preparations, speculation about the unusually early snow forecast, complaints about the tourists who still occasionally wandered through our small mountain community. But my mind kept drifting to Seattle, to the man I had tried so hard to forget. Did Zane ever think about me? Did he wonder where I had gone? Or had he simply hired a new assistant and moved on with his life? Had he married Veronica Ashford, the sophisticated woman who understood his world in ways I never could? "Maya," Sarah's voice cut through my brooding. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Looking like you're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders." Sarah studied my face with the kind of perceptive attention that made me uncomfortable. "You know, in 4 years of friendship, you've never told me about their father." The observation hit closer to home than I was prepared for. "There's not much to tell, really, because those girls have some very distinctive features that suggest their father was quite remarkable. Olden eyes aren't exactly common, even in our community." I felt my cheeks flush with heat. Sarah was right. Elena and Sophia's unusual eye color made them stand out even among werewolves, most of whom had brown or green eyes. The golden shade was rare, marking them as children of a powerful alpha bloodline. "It's complicated," I said finally. "Most worthwhile things are." Sarah leaned forward, her expression gentle but determined. "Maya, I've been watching you for 4 years. You're an amazing mother, a valued member of our community, and one of the kindest people I've ever met. but you're also clearly carrying some kind of heartbreak that you refuse to share with anyone. Some things are better left in the past. Are they? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your past is very much present in those beautiful daughters of yours. And maybe it's time you stopped running from whatever sent you here. Before I could respond, a cafe door chimed and a newcomer entered. A tall man in an expensive suit who looked completely out of place in our small mountain town. He had the kind of polished appearance that spoke of corporate boardrooms and private jets. And something about his bearing made my wolf stiffen with recognition. "Excuse me," he said, approaching our table with the confidence of someone accustomed to having his questions answered. "I'm looking for someone, a woman named Maya Rodriguez. I was told she might live in this area." My blood turned to ice as I recognized the voice, even though I couldn't see his face clearly from my angle. Marcus Blackstone, Zane's brother, the man who had helped arrange my departure from Blackstone Industries 4 years ago. "I'm sorry," Sarah said politely, "but I don't think I know anyone by that name." "Are you sure?" Marcus pressed. She would be about 28, brown hair, blue eyes. She might be going by a different name now. Sarah's eyes flicked to me, and I could see understanding dawning in her expression. "No," she said firmly. "I'm afraid I can't help you." "If you do happen to remember anything," Marcus continued, placing a business card on our table, "I'd appreciate a call. It's very important that I find her." After he left, Sarah and I sat in tense silence for several minutes. Finally, she picked up the business card and read it aloud. "Marcus Blackstone, Chief Financial Officer, Blackstone Industries." "Maya," she said quietly, "what exactly did you run away from?" I stared at the business card, my hands shaking as the carefully constructed life I had built began to crumble around me. 4 years of peace, 4 years of believing I was safe. And now Zane's brother was here looking for me. "My past," I said finally, "and it looks like it just caught up with me." Have you ever had to choose between love and protecting your heart? What would you do if your secret came back to find you after years of hiding? Let me know in the comments, beautiful listeners. Chapter 5. The Teacher's New Life. The knock on my cottage door came at exactly 7 o'clock that evening, just as I was finishing dinner with the girls. Through the window, I could see Marcus Blackstone standing on my front porch, looking as out of place, in his expensive suit, as a wolf in a henhouse. "Girls," I said, keeping my voice carefully calm, "why don't you go play in your room for a while? There's a grown-up I need to talk to." "Is it about Daddy?" Sophia asked with the unsettling perception that 4-year-olds sometimes displayed. The question hit me like a physical blow. "Why would you ask that, sweetheart?" "Because you have the same look you get when we ask about him," Elena said matter-of-factly. "Like you're sad but trying not to show it." Sometimes their intelligence was more curse than blessing. "Just go play, please. I'll be up to read stories in a little while." After they disappeared upstairs, I took a deep breath and opened the door to face the man who could destroy everything I had built. "Hello, Maya," Marcus said gently. Or should I say, Maria Rodriguez. "How did you find me?" I asked, not bothering to deny my identity. "It took 4 years and 3 private investigators," he replied. "You did an excellent job of disappearing." "Can I come in?" Every instinct I possessed screamed at me to slam the door in his face, to deny everything and hope he would give up and leave. But Marcus had always been the more reasonable of the Blackstone brothers, and something in his expression suggested he wasn't here to cause trouble. "5 minutes," I said, stepping aside to let him enter. He looked around my small living room with obvious curiosity, taking in the children's toys scattered across the floor, the artwork covering the refrigerator, the general chaos of a home where 2 energetic 4-year-olds lived. "You've built a nice life here," he said, settling into the chair I indicated. "Sarah Chen speaks very highly of you." "You talked to Sarah?" "I talked to everyone in town," he admitted. Most people were very protective of Maria Rodriguez, the widow who moved here with her twin daughters. Funny thing, though, None of them had ever heard of Maya Rodriguez. I remained standing, my arms crossed defensively across my chest. "What do you want, Marcus?" "I want to know why my brother's former assistant disappeared without a trace 4 years ago," he said bluntly. "And I want to know why she took his children with her." The words hung in the air between us like an accusation. I had always known this moment might come, but I had hoped to have more time to prepare for it. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said automatically. "Maya?" His voice carried a note of gentle exasperation. "I've seen the girls. They have Zane's eyes, the exact same golden shade that's been in our family for generations. Either you had an affair with someone else who happens to carry Blackstone genes, or my brother is a father and doesn't know it." The careful facade I had maintained for 4 years crumbled like a house of cards. I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted by the weight of secrets I had been carrying alone. "How long have you known?" I asked quietly. "I suspected something was wrong the day you quit," Marcus replied. Zane was different after his father's funeral, more withdrawn, more angry, more focused on work to the exclusion of everything else. When you suddenly resigned and then vanished completely, I knew something had happened between you two, and you waited 4 years to come looking for me. I tried to talk to Zane first, asked him directly if there was something he wanted to tell me about you. Marcus's expression grew pained. He shut down completely, said you had moved on to better opportunities and he didn't want to discuss it further. "So why are you here now?" Marcus was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. "Because my brother is destroying himself. He's worked 18-hour days for the past 4 years, driven away every friend and potential romantic partner, and generally made himself miserable. I thought maybe if I could find you, if I could understand what really happened, you thought you could fix whatever was broken between us?" I finished. "Something like that." He looked up at me with eyes that were the same green as his brother's, but somehow warmer. "Maya, I know Zane. I know he can be cold and controlling and absolutely ruthless when it comes to business. But I also know he's capable of love, even if he's forgotten how to show it." He made his feelings about our encounter very clear, I said, trying to keep the old pain out of my voice. I was a mistake he deeply regretted. "Was he talking to David Chen when you overheard that?" The specificity of the question surprised me. "Yes, how did you?" "Because David has been trying to set Zane up with his sister for the past 3 years, Marcus said grimly. "And because I know my brother well enough to know that he would never discuss his real feelings about you with David or anyone else who might use that information against him." I stared at him, trying to process what he was suggesting. "You think he was lying?" "I think he was protecting himself, the only way he knows how, by pushing away anyone who might have the power to hurt him." Marcus leaned forward, his expression earnest. "Maya, our father was difficult, demanding, critical, impossible to please. Zane learned very early that showing vulnerability was dangerous, that caring about anything too much gave others power over you." It doesn't excuse anything," Marcus agreed. "But it might explain why a man who was clearly falling in love with his assistant would be so determined to convince everyone, including himself, that she meant nothing to him. The suggestion that Zane might have been falling in love with me was so far from anything I had ever imagined that it left me speechless. For 4 years, I had built my new life on the foundation of his rejection, on the certainty that our night together had been meaningless to him. "Even if that were true," I said finally, "it doesn't change anything. He never tried to contact me, never tried to find me. If I meant something to him, why did he let me disappear?" "Because he's an idiot," Marcus said bluntly, "and because he probably convinced himself that you were better off without him." Before I could respond, the sound of small feet on the stairs announced that my daughters had grown tired of playing quietly in their room. Elena appeared first, followed closely by Sophia. Both of them staring at Marcus with the frank curiosity of children encountering something new. "Mama," Elena said, "who's the man in the fancy clothes?" "This is Mr. Blackstone," I said carefully. "He's an old friend." "Blackstone?" Sophia repeated, testing the word. "That's a funny name." "It is, isn't it?" Marcus said, his voice gentle as he studied their faces. "What are your names?" "I'm Elena, and this is Sophia," Elena announced with the confidence of a child who had been taught not to be afraid of strangers. "We're twins, but we're not identical because I'm older." "By 3 minutes," Sophia added solemnly. 3 minutes, Marcus repeated, and I could see wonder and recognition dawning in his expression as he took in their features. Not just the distinctive eye color, but the shape of their faces, the way they carried themselves, the intelligence that shone from their golden gaze. "They're beautiful, Maya," he said quietly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," I managed. "How old are you girls?" he asked. 4, they said in unison. 4, Marcus repeated, and I knew he was doing the math, calculating back to when they would have been conceived. "That's a very good age. Are you here to see Mama about?" "Work?" Sophia asked with the directness that sometimes embarrassed me in public, because she doesn't work at the big company anymore. She teaches school and grows plants now. "I know," Marcus said gently. "And I think that's wonderful, girls," I said, recognizing the need to end this conversation before it went any further. "It's time for your bath. Go upstairs, and I'll be there in a few minutes." "But Mama," Elena started to protest. "Now, please." After they had reluctantly headed back upstairs, Marcus and I sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke. "They're remarkable," he said. "Intelligent, confident, clearly well-loved. You've done an amazing job raising them." "Thank you, Maya. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." His expression grew serious. "Are you planning to tell Zane about them?" The question I had been dreading for 4 years. "No." "Why not?" "Because I heard what he thought about our night together," I said, old pain bleeding into my voice. "Because he made it clear that I was a complication he didn't want in his life. Because I won't subject my daughters to a father who sees them as obligations instead of blessings. And if you're wrong about his feelings, I'm not wrong. But if you are," Marcus pressed gently, "if Zane has spent the past 4 years regretting the way he handled things, if he's been looking for you without knowing where to start, if he would give anything to have you and his children in his life, wouldn't he deserve the chance to prove it?" The possibility he was suggesting was too dangerous to consider. I had spent 4 years building walls around my heart, protecting myself and my daughters from the pain of loving someone who couldn't love us back. "Even if that were true," I said carefully, "too much time has passed. Too much has changed. I have a life here, a community that accepts us. I won't uproot my daughters just to satisfy your brother's curiosity about what might have been." What might have been? "What if it's not curiosity?" Marcus asked quietly. "What if it's love?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. The caller ID showed Sarah's number, and I answered it gratefully, eager for any distraction from this impossible conversation. "Maya." Sarah's voice was tight with urgency. "You need to get to the school right now. There's been an incident." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of incident? Are the girls okay?" "They're fine, but there was an accident during evening childcare. A tourist's car went off the road near the playground, and Elena, Maya, she did something. Something that's got people asking questions you might not want to answer." I closed my eyes, knowing exactly what Sarah meant. Elena had inherited more than just her father's eye color. She had also inherited supernatural abilities that she was still too young to control or understand. "I'll be right there," I said, already reaching for my keys. "Maya," Marcus said, as I headed for the door. "Whatever's happening, let me help." "You've helped enough," I replied, Please, just leave us alone." But as I drove toward the school, my hands shaking on the steering wheel, I couldn't shake the feeling that my carefully constructed world was about to collapse completely. Some secrets were too big to keep hidden forever. Chapter 6: The Father's Shock. I arrived at the school to find chaos barely contained by the small-town politeness that characterized Glacier Falls. Emergency vehicles lined the street, their red and blue lights painting the evening shadows in harsh, urgent colors. A crowd of parents and curious onlookers had gathered around the playground area, their voices creating a low buzz of speculation and concern. Maya. Sarah appeared at my side immediately, her face tight with worry. "Thank God you're here. Where are my daughters?" I asked, scanning the crowd for familiar golden eyes, inside with Principal Morrison. "They're fine," she assured me quickly. "But Maya, what Elena did, people are talking." I could feel my heart hammering against my ribs as Sarah led me through the crowd toward the school building. Through the gathering darkness, I could see the twisted wreckage of a sedan that had apparently skidded off the wet road and crashed into the large oak tree that stood at the edge of the playground. "What happened?" I asked. "Tourist family from Billings," Sarah explained in a low voice. "Father lost control on the wet leads, went right through the playground fence. The car was heading straight for a group of children." When she paused, glancing around nervously. "When what?" "When Elena stepped in front of it and stopped it." The words hit me like a physical blow. "She what?" "Maya, I saw it with my own eyes. That little girl walked right up to a moving car and put her hands on the hood, and the entire vehicle just stopped, like she had some kind of supernatural strength." My worst fears were being confirmed with every word. Elena's werewolf abilities were manifesting early, far earlier than they should have in a child her age. In the supernatural community, such displays of power were usually attributed to strong alpha bloodlines. Exactly the kind of thing that would draw unwanted attention to children who were supposed to be living under assumed names. "How many people saw it?" I asked. "Too many," Sarah said grimly. "And some of them aren't from our community. That tourist family, the EMT crews, a couple of hikers who were passing through. Maya, this is going to be impossible to cover up." As we entered the school building, I caught sight of a familiar figure standing in the hallway outside the principal's office. Marcus Blackstone had apparently followed me, and he was engaged in what appeared to be an intense conversation with Principal Morrison. Completely understandable that children might act impulsively in crisis situations. Marcus was saying, in the smooth, authoritative tone that had probably closed countless business deals. "But I'm sure you'll agree that protecting the privacy of minors should be everyone's priority." "Of course, Mr. Principal," Morrison replied. "Blackstone, I'm a family friend," Marcus said without missing a beat. "And I think it would be best if we kept the details of this incident as simple as possible. A car accident, a fortunate lack of serious injuries. A community coming together to help. The specifics of how the children avoided harm seem less important than the fact that everyone is safe." I could see Marcus working his corporate magic, using his natural authority, and probably a generous donation to ensure that the supernatural aspects of Elena's intervention were downplayed or forgotten entirely. It was exactly the kind of damage control that someone with his resources and connections could provide. "Mama." Sophia's voice drew my attention to the principal's office, where both girls were sitting in chairs that made them look impossibly small. Elena's clothes were dirty and her face was stripped with tears, while Sophia clung to her sister's hand with protective determination. "Are you okay?" I asked, dropping to my knees in front of them and checking for injuries with hands that shook, despite my best efforts to remain calm. "I'm sorry, Mama," Elena whispered, her golden eyes wide with guilt and confusion. "I didn't mean to do anything wrong. The car was coming so fast and the other kids were scared. And I just wanted to help. You're not in trouble, sweetheart, I assured her, pulling both girls into a fierce hug. You were very brave, and you helped save those children. I'm proud of you. But everyone's looking at us funny, Sophia said quietly. Like we're different. The words broke my heart because they were true. In trying to protect other children. Period. Elena had exposed herself and her sister to exactly the kind of scrutiny I had spent 4 years trying to avoid. Mrs. Rodriguez, Principal Morrison said, appearing in the doorway with Marcus close behind. I wonder if we could have a word in private. I looked between my daughters and the two men, calculating rapidly. Elena was clearly exhausted from her display of power, and Sophia was upset by all the attention and chaos. They needed to go home, needed the safety and familiarity of our small cottage. Mr. Blackstone, I said carefully, would you mind staying with the girls for a moment? Marcus nodded immediately. Of course. I followed Principal Morrison into his office, bracing myself for the conversation I had been dreading for 4 years. Maria, he began, then paused. I'm sorry, but I have to ask, what exactly did I witness tonight? I don't know what you mean, I said automatically. A 4-year-old girl stopped a moving car with her bare hands, he said bluntly. That's not normal human behavior, even for children who are unusually strong or athletic. I stared at him, trying to read his expression. Principal Morrison had been part of the Glacier Falls community for 20 years. He knew that most of the residents were werewolves. Knew that supernatural abilities were not uncommon among his students. But Ella Lenena's display had been far beyond anything a child her age should have been capable of. Are you asking me if my daughters are werewolves? I said finally. I'm asking if there's something more than that, he replied. Maria, I've been working with supernatural children for 2 decades. I know the difference between normal werewolf strength and what I saw tonight. That little girl exhibited alpha-level abilities that shouldn't manifest until she's at least 12, if ever. The careful facade I had maintained for 4 years was crumbling completely. What are you saying? I'm saying that Elena and Sophia aren't just werewolf children. What? Principal Morrison said gently. They're alpha children, strong bloodline, probably multiple generations of alpha genetics. The kind of power they're displaying comes from very specific family lines. My heart sank as I realized he was connecting dots I had hoped would remain forever scattered. Principal Morrison, Maria, I'm not trying to cause problems for you, he interrupted. But I have a responsibility to all the children in my care. If Elena's abilities continue to manifest at this accelerated rate, she could accidentally hurt someone. She needs training, guidance from someone who understands alpha development. I can handle my daughter's education, I said firmly. Can you? His expression was kind but determined. Because unless you're an alpha yourself, or have access to alpha mentors, you're not equipped to help them control abilities this powerful. The truth was like a weight pressing down on my chest. Elena and Sophia were displaying the kind of supernatural abilities that marked them as children of an extremely powerful alpha bloodline. Exactly the kind of genetic heritage that came from their father's family. There's something else, Principal Morrison continued. The incident tonight was witnessed by several non-supernatural humans. I've managed to convince most of them that Elena simply got lucky, that the car was already slowing down when she reached it. But there are questions being asked, and some of those questions are coming from people who have resources to investigate further. What kind of people? The kind who work for corporations that study supernatural abilities, he said quietly. The kind who might be very interested in children who display alpha-level powers at such a young age. Terror shot through me like an electric shock. 4 years of hiding. 4 years of building a safe life for my daughters. And now corporate interests were circling like vultures around children who had inherited abilities they were too young to control. What do you recommend? I asked, though I was afraid I already knew the answer. Find their father, Principal Morrison said bluntly. If Elena and Sophia are displaying this level of power, Their alpha parent needs to be involved in their training. It's not just about education anymore, Maria. It's about their safety. When I emerged from the office, I found Marcus sitting on the floor with my daughters, showing them something on his phone that was making them giggle, despite the evening's trauma. The sight of him with Elena and Sophia, their uncle, though they didn't know it, made my chest tight with complicated emotions. "Ready to go home?" I asked, proud that my voice remained steady. "Can Mr. Blackstone come with us?" Sophia asked hopefully. "He has pictures of puppies on his phone." "I'm sure Mr. Blackstone has other places he needs to be," I said diplomatically. "Actually," Marcus said, standing gracefully and helping the girls to their feet, "I was hoping we could continue our conversation from earlier. There are things you need to know, Maya. Things that might change your perspective on the situation." I looked at my daughters, tired, confused, still processing what had happened tonight, and realized that my time for hiding was rapidly running out. Principal Morrison was right about the dangers they faced, right about their need for proper training, and Marcus was right that their father deserved to know they existed. "All right," I said quietly, "but not tonight. Tomorrow after the girls are in school." "Actually," Marcus said carefully, "I don't think school is a good idea tomorrow or for the next few days." "Why not?" He pulled out his phone and showed me a news alert from a regional website. "Mysterious incident at small town school raises questions about local children." My blood turned to ice as I read the brief article which described the car accident and mentioned unconfirmed reports of unusual behavior by one of the children present. There was no mention of Elena by name, but it was only a matter of time before someone connected the dots. "How fast does news travel these days?" I asked weakly. "Fast enough," Marcus replied. "Maya, you need to make a decision. You can keep trying to hide. Keep pretending that Elena and Sophia are ordinary children who can live ordinary lives. Or you can trust me to help you navigate this situation before it spirals completely out of control." I looked at my daughters who were listening to our conversation with the kind of serious attention that reminded me they were far more perceptive than their age suggested. They deserved to know the truth about their heritage, deserved to understand why they were different and what that meant for their future. Most of all, they deserved to know their father. "If I agree to this," I said slowly, "if I let you help us, what exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that you and the girls come to Seattle," Marcus said, temporarily. "Just until we can figure out the best way to handle this situation. You'll stay in a secure location where Elena and Sophia can receive proper training for their abilities, and where you'll be protected from any corporate interests who might want to exploit them. And Zane will have the chance to meet his daughters," Marcus said simply. "What happens after that is up to all of you." The idea of seeing Zane again, of facing the man who had broken my heart and changed my life forever, was terrifying. But the alternative, continuing to run while my daughter's abilities made them increasingly visible to dangerous people, was worse. "I need time to think," I said. "Maya," Marcus said gently, "I don't think time is something we have a lot of. The people who are asking questions about tonight's incident, they're not going to just lose interest and move on." As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Miss Rodriguez, we would like to discuss your daughter's remarkable abilities. Please call us at your earliest convenience. Dr. Sarah Vasquez, Progenitor Research Group." The name hit me like a physical blow. Progenitor Research, the same company that had been abducting and experimenting on supernatural beings, the same organization that Sage Stormclaw had helped expose years ago. Somehow, they had connected Elena's display of power to our family, and now they wanted to discuss my daughter's abilities. "Marcus," I said, my voice shaking as I showed him the text, "we need to leave tonight." He read the message, and his expression went deadly serious. "Pack light," he said immediately. "Just essentials. We'll be on a plane to Seattle within 2 hours." "Mama?" Elena asked, sensing the sudden tension in the room. "Is something wrong?" No, sweetheart, I said, kneeling down to her level and trying to project more calm than I felt. We're just going to take a little trip, an adventure to see Daddy, Sophia asked with the intuitive leap that sometimes took my breath away. I met Marcus's eyes over their heads, seeing understanding and determination in his expression. There was no more time for hiding, no more chances to avoid the confrontation I had been dreading for 4 years. Yes, I said quietly, to see Daddy. As we hurried home to pack, I caught Marcus making phone calls in low, urgent tones, arranging transportation, coordinating security, managing the kind of crisis that required resources and connections I couldn't begin to match. For 4 years, I had convinced myself that I was protecting my daughters by keeping them away from their father's world. Now I was beginning to realize that I might have been putting them in more danger by trying to hide their true nature. Some secrets were too powerful to keep hidden forever, and some fathers were too important to deny, no matter how much they had hurt their children's mother. By midnight, we were on Marcus's private jet, flying towards Seattle, and the confrontation that would change all our lives forever. Elena and Sophia slept, curled up together in the luxury seats, exhausted by the day's events, and trusting their mother to keep them safe. I stared out the window at the lights below, my hand resting protectively on the small bag that contained everything we owned, and tried to prepare myself for seeing Zane again. 4 years ago, I had run away to protect my heart. Tonight, I was running toward the very man who had broken it, because protecting my daughters was more important than protecting myself. Some kinds of love were worth any price, even the risk of being destroyed all over again. Chapter 7. Confronting the Past. The Blackstone family estate sat on 20 acres of manicured grounds overlooking Elliott Bay, a sprawling testament to old money and older power. As Marcus's car wound up the private drive toward the main house, I felt like I was approaching a fortress designed to keep people like me firmly on the outside. It's big, Sophia observed from her car seat, pressing her face against the window to get a better view of the imposing stone mansion. Really big, Elena agreed. Do you think Daddy lives in a castle? Something like that, I murmured, my stomach churning with anxiety as we pulled up to the front entrance. It was barely 6 in the morning, but Marcus had insisted on bringing us here directly from the airport. Zane's an early riser, he had explained, and this conversation is better handled in private before his staff arrives for the day. Now, as I helped my daughters out of the car and looked up at the intimidating facade of Zane's childhood home, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake. The girls looked impossibly small against the backdrop of such overwhelming wealth and privilege. 2 little mountain children about to meet their billionaire father. Maya. Marcus's voice was gentle as he noticed my hesitation. He's going to love them, and once he gets over the shock, he's going to be grateful that you came back. And if he's not, I asked quietly, then I'll personally ensure that you and the girls are protected and provided for, regardless of what Zane decides. Marcus replied firmly. But Maya, I really don't think that's going to be necessary. The front door opened before we could knock, and I found myself face to face with Mrs. Henderson, the elderly housekeeper who had worked for the Blackstone family for over 30 years. She took one look at Elena and Sophia and gasped audibly. Merciful heavens, she breathed. They look just like their father. Marcus finished gently. Mrs. Henderson, this is Maya Rodriguez and her daughters, Elena and Sophia. They're here to see Zane. Mrs. Henderson's weathered face cycled through surprise, understanding, and something that looked like joy. Mr. Zane is in his study, she said, her voice thick with emotion. He's been working since 4 o'clock this morning, as usual. Is he expecting us? I asked. No, Marcus admitted. I thought surprise was the better approach, given the circumstances, as we followed Mrs. Henderson through the opulent hallways of the mansion. I caught glimpses of Zane's childhood through the family photographs that lined the walls. There he was at 10, serious and intense even as a boy. At 15, already showing the commanding presence that would make him one of the youngest CEOs in corporate history. At 21, graduating summa cum laude from Harvard Business School with the kind of focused determination that had built an empire. But it was the recent photos that made my chest tighten with complicated emotions. Zay at various corporate events, always alone, always professional. With the kind of polished isolation that spoke of a man who had everything except what mattered most. "Mama," Elena whispered, tugging on my hand. "I'm scared." "Me too, sweetheart," I admitted, squeezing her small fingers. "But sometimes we have to be brave even when we're scared." "Will Daddy like us?" Sophia asked with the heartbreaking vulnerability that only children could manage. "He's going to love you," I said, hoping I was telling the truth. Mrs. Henderson stopped outside a heavy oak door and knocked softly. "Mr. Zane, your brother is here to see you. He's brought some guests. Tell Marcus I'll meet with him after the Tokyo call," came Zane's voice from behind the door. Still the same rich, commanding tone that had haunted my dreams for 4 years. "Sir, I really think you should see them now." Mrs. Henderson persisted gently. There was a pause, then the sound of a chair being pushed back from a desk. "Fine, send them in." Henderson opened the door and ushered us into Zane's private study, a room that managed to be both intimidating and comfortable, with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, and massive fireplace. But all I could see was the man standing behind the desk, frozen in the act of closing his laptop. 4 years had changed him. He was still devastatingly handsome, still carried himself with the kind of authority that commanded attention. But there were new lines around his eyes, a weariness in his posture that spoke of exhaustion, that went deeper than simple overwork. His golden eyes, the same unusual shade that marked Elena and Sophia as his children, fixed on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. For a moment, we simply stared at each other across the space of his study. 4 years of separation and unspoken words hanging between us like a wall. "Maya," he said finally. My name barely a whisper. "Hello, Zane." I managed, proud that my voice remained steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. That's when his gaze shifted to the 2 small figures standing beside me, and I watched his face cycle through confusion, recognition, and absolute shock as he took in their distinctive eye color and familiar features. "These are," he began, then stopped, apparently unable to finish the sentence. "Elena and Sophia," I said quietly. "Your daughters." The silence that followed was deafening. Zane gripped the edge of his desk like it was the only thing keeping him upright, his golden eyes moving between the girls' faces as if he was trying to solve an impossible puzzle. "My daughters," he repeated slowly, testing the words. "Hi, Daddy," Sophia said with the fearless directness that had gotten her in trouble more times than I could count. "We've been wondering about you." A simple greeting seemed to break something open inside Zane's chest. He moved around the desk with careful deliberation, dropping to his knees in front of the girls so he could look at them at eye level. "Hello," he said softly, his voice rough with emotion. You're beautiful. We look like you," Elena observed with the analytical mind she had inherited from him. "Mama says we have your eyes." "You do," Zane agreed, his own eyes bright with unshed tears. "How old are you?" 4, they said in unison. 4, he repeated, and I could see him doing the math, calculating back to when they would have been conceived. His gaze flicked up to mine briefly, filled with questions and accusations and something that looked like grief. "They're exceptional children," Marcus said quietly from behind us. "Intelligent, brave, already showing signs of significant supernatural abilities. Zane's attention sharpened immediately, his alpha instincts recognizing the implications. Elena stopped a moving car with her bare hands yesterday. I said, "That's how Marcus found us. That's why we're here." Zane's expression went from wonder to concern to something approaching fear. "She what?" "It was an accident," Elena said quickly, apparently sensing his alarm. "I didn't mean to show off. The car was going to hit the other kids, and I couldn't let that happen." "She was protecting her friends," Sophia added loyally. "Elena always protects people." I could see Zane processing this information, understanding the implications of children so young displaying such powerful abilities. In the werewolf world, early manifestation of alpha-level powers usually indicated an extraordinarily strong bloodline, exactly the kind of genetic heritage that could attract dangerous attention. "Maya," he said, rising to his full height and fixing me with an intense stare. "We need to talk privately. I don't want to leave them." "They'll be fine," Mrs. Henderson interrupted gently. "I'd be happy to show Elena and Sophia the kitchen. I believe there are fresh chocolate chip cookies that need proper evaluation." "Can we, Mama?" Sophia asked hopefully. I looked at my daughters, weighing my protective instincts against the need to have an honest conversation with their father. "Stay with Mrs. Henderson," I said finally. "Don't wander off and don't touch anything expensive. We'll be good," Elena promised solemnly. After they left with the housekeeper, Zane moved to the fireplace and stood with his back to me, his hands braced against the mantel as if he was trying to hold himself together through physical force. "4 years," he said finally. "You've been raising my children for 4 years, and you never told me." "You made it very clear that I was a mistake you regretted," I replied, old pain bleeding into my voice. "Why would I subject them to a father who saw them as complications?" He spun around to face me, his expression fierce. "You think I would have seen my own children as complications? I think you saw everything in your personal life as a complication," I shot back. "Including me? Nay?" "No," I interrupted, years of suppressed anger finally finding their voice. "You don't get to be upset with me for protecting them. You called our night together a moment of weakness. You told your business partners that you deeply regretted what happened between us. What was I supposed to think? You were supposed to trust me," he said desperately. "You were supposed to give me the chance to do the right thing." "The right thing?" I stared at him in disbelief. "Zane, you couldn't even look at me the morning after we were together. You left me a note like I was some one-night stand you needed to dismiss politely. I was trying to protect you. From what? From me." The words exploded from him with the force of years of suppressed emotion. "From my world. From the expectations and obligations that would have destroyed anything beautiful between us. Maya, I was falling in love with you, and that terrified me more than anything I'd ever faced." The confession hit me like a physical blow. "You were what?" "Falling in love," he repeated quietly. "Had been for months, maybe years. And when we finally came together that night, when I held you and felt what it was like to have someone see past all the armor and authority to the man underneath, I knew I was lost." I stared at him, trying to reconcile this admission with everything I thought I knew about that night and its aftermath. "Then why did you push me away? Why did you let me leave?" "Because I was a coward," he said simply. "Because I had no idea how to be in love. How to balance my feelings for you with the demands of running a company and leading a pack. Because I was convinced that loving me would destroy you the way it destroyed my mother." The reference to his mother, who had died when Zane was 15, unable to handle the pressures of being mated to a powerful alpha, made my chest tighten with understanding. "Zane, I spent 4 years telling myself I had done the right thing," he continued, his voice breaking slightly. "That you were better off without me. That you had found happiness with someone who could give you a normal life. And now I discover that you were raising my children alone. Protecting them from dangers I should have been there to face with you. The pain in his voice was so raw, so honest, that it cut through years of carefully constructed defenses. "I thought you didn't want us," I whispered. "I wanted you so much, it was killing me," he replied fiercely. "But I was too proud and too scared to fight for what we had." And now he gestured helplessly toward the door where our daughters had disappeared. "Now I've missed 4 years of their lives because I was too much of a coward to tell you I loved you." The word love hung in the air between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was brave enough to cross. "Zane, I know I don't deserve another chance," he said quickly. "I know I hurt you in ways that might be impossible to forgive. But Maya, please let me be their father. Let me protect them the way I should have been protecting you all along." Before I could respond, the door burst open and Elena came running in, her face bright with excitement. "Mama, Daddy, Mrs. Henderson showed us the horses, and she says Daddy has a pool, and there's a library with more books than the whole school." She skidded to a stop in front of Zane, looking up at him with the kind of open adoration that only children could manage. "Are you really our daddy?" "Yes," Zane said, his voice thick with emotion as he knelt down to her level again. "I really am." "Good," she said matter-of-factly. "We've been waiting to meet you for a really long time." As I watched my daughter embrace the father she had never known, as I saw the wonder and love in Zane's eyes when he held her for the first time, I realized that some things were worth fighting for, even when the odds seemed impossible. Especially then. Chapter 8. The Choice. The family meeting convened in Zane's private dining room 2 hours later, after Elena and Sophia had been fed, bathed, and settled for naps in bedrooms that Mrs. Henderson had hastily prepared for them. The girls had adapted to their father's mansion with the resilience of children already claiming the library as their favorite room and demanding to know when they could visit the horses. Now the adults sat around the polished mahogany table, the weight of 4 years' worth of secrets and decisions pressing down on us like a physical force. The situation is more complicated than just family reunification. Marcus began spreading documents across the table. The incident at Elena's school has attracted attention from Progenitor Research Group, the same organization that was experimenting on supernatural beings a few years ago. Zane's expression darkened immediately. "I thought they were shut down. The main facility was, but the company reconstituted under new leadership. They're still very interested in studying supernatural abilities, particularly in children who display early manifestation of powers." Marcus pulled out his tablet and showed us a news article. "There's already speculation online about unusual phenomena in small Montana towns. It's only a matter of time before they connect Elena's abilities to our family." "What are you saying?" I asked, though I was afraid I already knew. "I'm saying that hiding isn't an option anymore," Marcus replied gently. "Elena and Sophia need proper training for their abilities, and they need the protection that comes from being recognized as Blackstone heirs. Protection." Zane's voice carried the kind of alpha authority that had built an empire. "What kind of threats are we talking about? Corporate kidnapping, coercive research contracts? Potentially worse is they decide the girls' abilities are worth the risk of open conflict with our pack." Marcus's expression was grim. "Zane, these children aren't just powerful. They're potentially the most powerful alpha offspring born in generations. Their combined genetic heritage makes them invaluable to people who want to weaponize supernatural abilities." I felt the blood drain from my face as the full implications hit me. "You're saying my daughters are in danger because of who their father is?" "I'm saying they're in danger because of who they are," Marcus corrected. "The Blackstone bloodline carries genetic markers for alpha abilities going back 12 generations. Maya, your own family line includes several powerful healers and pack leaders. Elena and Sophia represent the convergence of 2 exceptionally strong supernatural bloodlines, which is why they need their father's protection," Zane said firmly, his golden eyes fixed on me with laser intensity. "Maya, I can provide security, training, resources that you can't access on your own." At what cost? I asked. What does accepting your protection mean for their futures, for their freedom to choose their own paths? It means they'll be alive to make those choices, he replied bluntly. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of small feet running down the hallway, followed by Elena's voice calling, "Mama, Daddy, come see what we found." We followed the sound to the library, where both girls were standing in front of a portrait that hung above the fireplace, a formal family painting that showed a younger Zane and Marcus with their parents. "Look," Sophia said excitedly, pointing at the portrait. "The lady has the same eyes as us." I studied the painting more closely and realized she was right. The woman in the portrait, Zane's mother, Helen Blackstone, had the same distinctive golden eyes that marked Elena and Sophia as their father's children. "That's your grandmother?" Zane said softly, kneeling down beside them. "She would have loved you both very much." "Where is she now?" Elena asked, with the direct curiosity of childhood. "She died when I was not much older than you are now," Zane replied gently. "But she's watching over all of us, like the angels Mama tells us about," Sophia said solemnly, exactly like that. Watching Zane with our daughters, patient, gentle, completely captivated by their every word, made my chest tight with emotions I wasn't ready to name. He was a natural father, despite having no experience with children. The girls had taken to him immediately, as if some genetic instinct recognized him as family. "Girls," I said, "why don't you go explore the rest of the library while the grown-ups finish talking?" "Can we touch the books?" Elena asked hopefully. Carefully, Zane said with a smile that transformed his entire face. "Some of them are very old and special." After they wandered off to investigate the leather-bound volumes that lined the shelves, the three adults returned to the dining room to continue our interrupted discussion. "Maya," Zane said, his voice gentle but determined, "I know you have reservations about bringing the girls into my world, but the threats they're facing aren't going to disappear just because we ignore them." "I'm not ignoring them," I protested. "I'm trying to figure out what's best for Elena and Sophia, not what's convenient for their father's conscience." "That's not fair," Marcus interjected. "Zane isn't trying to ease his conscience. He's trying to protect his children. Children he didn't know existed until this morning." I shot back. "Because you didn't tell him." Marcus replied firmly. "Maya, I understand why you made the choices you did 4 years ago, but the situation has changed. Your daughters need resources and protection that only their father can provide." "And what about what I need?" The question came out sharper than I intended, colored by years of suppressed pain and uncertainty. Zane leaned forward, his expression intense. "What do you need, Maya? Tell me and I'll make it happen." "I need to know that you're not going to treat them like business assets," I said quietly. "I need to know that their value to you goes beyond their genetic heritage and supernatural abilities." "They're my children," he said fiercely. "My daughters, they could be completely ordinary humans, and I would still love them with everything I have." "And me?" The question slipped out before I could stop it. "Where do I fit in this new arrangement?" The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken possibilities. Zane's golden eyes held mine across the table, and I could see him weighing his words carefully. "Where do you want to fit?" he asked finally. It was such a simple question, but it carried the weight of everything we had lost and everything we might still have. 4 years ago, I had run away because I believed he didn't want me. Now, he was asking me to define my own place in his life, in our daughter's future. "I want to be their mother," I said carefully. "I want to make sure they're safe and happy and loved." "And what about us?" he pressed gently. "Maya, is there any possibility that we could try again? That we could build something together for their sake?" "For their sake," I repeated, searching his expression for clues about his real feelings. "For all our sakes," he corrected. "Because I meant what I said earlier. I was falling in love with you 4 years ago, and seeing you again, seeing the incredible woman you've become, and the amazing mother you are. Those feelings haven't changed. Zane, I know I hurt you, he continued urgently. I know I made mistakes that cost us years together, but Maya, we have a chance here to build something better than what we lost. Not just for Elena and Sophia, but for us. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number that had contacted me in Montana. Miss Rodriguez, we know where you are. We'll be in touch soon to discuss arrangements for your daughter's education. Dr. Vasquez, progenitor research. The message sent ice through my veins. Somehow, they had tracked us to Seattle, possibly even to Zane's family estate. They found us, I said, showing the text to both men. Zane's expression went deadly serious as he read the message. Marcus, contact security immediately. Full lockdown protocols, and I want a sweep of the entire property. Already on it, Marcus replied, his fingers flying over his phone screen. Maya, Zane said, his voice carrying the kind of alpha authority that bade no argument. You and the girls are staying here, not just tonight, until this threat is neutralized completely. I can't just move into your house. Yes, you can, he interrupted firmly. Maya, these people are threatening our children. They're threatening the woman I love. I'm not letting you face this alone. The casual declaration of love hit me like lightning. But before I could process it fully, Elena and Sophia came running back into the dining room. Mama, there are men with scary faces outside, Elena reported with the matter-of-fact tone that children used for announcing everything from scraped knees to natural disasters. They're security guards, Zane explained calmly, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. They're here to keep us all safe. Safe from what? Sophia asked. From people who might want to hurt families like ours, he said honestly. But don't worry, no one is going to hurt you while I'm here. The absolute certainty in his voice, the protective authority that radiated from him like heat from a fire, made something inside my chest unfurl for the first time in years. This was what I had been missing, what my daughters had needed. A father who would move heaven and earth to keep them safe. Okay, Daddy, Elena said simply, apparently satisfied by his reassurance. As evening fell around the Blackstone estate, as security teams swept the grounds and electronic countermeasures were deployed against potential surveillance, I found myself standing at the window of the bedroom that had been prepared for me, watching my daughters play in the garden under the watchful eyes of trained bodyguards. For 4 years, I had protected them alone. Tonight, for the first time since they were born, I didn't have to carry that burden by myself. The question was whether I was brave enough to let their father help me carry it. Chapter 9. Fighting for Love. The attack came at dawn, 3 days after our arrival at the Blackstone estate. I woke to the sound of alarms and the acrid smell of smoke. My maternal instinct screaming that something was terribly wrong. Elena, Sophia, I called, rushing from my room toward the children's wing of the house. Maya. Zane's voice cut through the chaos as he appeared in the hallway, already dressed and clearly coordinating some kind of response. The girls are safe. Marcus has them in the secure room. We need to get you there too. What's happening? Progenitor made their move, he said grimly, his hand closing around mine as he led me through corridors I was still learning to navigate. Professional assault team, electronic warfare, the whole package. They want Elena and Sophia, and they're willing to fight for them. The secure room was located in the basement of the mansion, a windowless space equipped with independent power, communication systems, and enough supplies to last for days if necessary. I found my daughters huddled with Marcus and Mrs. Henderson, their faces pale but determined. Mama. Sophia launched herself into my arms, her small body trembling with fear and adrenaline. Are you hurt? I asked, checking both girls for injuries while my heart hammered against my ribs. We're okay, Elena said with the kind of false bravery that made my chest ache. Uncle Marcus said the bad people can't get us here. That's right, Marcus confirmed, though his expression was grim as he monitored multiple screens showing security footage from around the property. Zane's handling the situation upstairs. Handling it how? I demanded. The way alphas handle threats to their families, Marcus replied without taking his eyes off the monitors. Through the security feeds, I could see figures in tactical gear moving through the mansion's grounds, their movements coordinated and professional. But I could also see Zane's security teams responding with equal skill. And something else that made my breath catch. Wolves. Dozens of them, moving through the shadows with predatory grace. Their eyes reflecting green in the infrared cameras. Zane had called in his pack, summoning every wolf under his protection to defend his home and family. Is that legal? I asked weakly. Defending one's territory from invaders. Marcus's smile was sharp as a blade. Absolutely. Especially when those invaders are trying to kidnap children. The battle raged for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. I watched on the security monitors as Zane coordinated his forces with the kind of strategic brilliance that had built his business empire, turning the attackers' advantages against them until Progenitor's assault teams were overwhelmed and retreating. When the alarms finally stopped and the all-clear signal sounded, Zane appeared in the secure room doorway, looking like he had stepped out of a war zone, his clothes torn, his face dry with dirt, but his golden eyes blazing with triumph. It's over, he announced. Progenitor's forces have been neutralized, and Dr. Vasquez is in custody, along with her entire team. Daddy. Elena and Sofia rushed to him simultaneously, apparently unconcerned by his disheveled appearance and more interested in reassuring themselves that he was safe. Hey there, brave girls, he said softly, kneeling down to gather them both into his arms. Did you take care of Mama and Uncle Marcus while I was gone? We were very good, Sofia reported solemnly, even when the loud noises started. I'm proud of you both, he said, his voice thick with emotion as he held them close. You're the bravest kids I know. Watching him with our daughters, protective, gentle, completely devoted, made my chest tight with emotions I was still afraid to name. This was the man I had fallen in love with 6 years ago. Beneath all the corporate armor and alpha authority, a man who would fight heaven and earth to protect the people he loved. Maya, he said, rising to his full height while keeping one hand on each girl's shoulder. We need to talk. There are things you need to know about what just happened. An hour later, after Elena and Sofia had been settled with Mrs. Henderson for lunch and a much-needed nap, the adults gathered in Zane's study to debrief the morning's events. Progenitor was more organized than we anticipated. Marcus reported, consulting his tablet. Professional military contractors, advanced surveillance equipment, detailed intelligence about our security protocols. Someone's been planning this operation for months. How did they get so much information about the estate? I asked. Good question, Zane replied grimly. We're investigating potential security breaches, but my guess is they've been watching our family for longer than we realized. Because of Elena and Sofia's abilities, because of their genetic heritage, Hiko corrected. Maya, the girls don't just carry Blackstone alpha genes, they carry yours as well. Your family's healing abilities, combined with our pack leadership traits, make them potentially the most powerful supernatural children born in decades. The weight of that revelation settled over me like a shroud. You're saying they'll always be targets. I'm saying they'll always be valuable, Zane said carefully. But Maya, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Powerful bloodlines carry responsibilities as well as dangers. What kind of responsibilities? Leadership, Marcus answered. Elena and Sofia aren't just our children. They're the next generation of supernatural leaders. They have the potential to bridge different communities, to heal conflicts that have existed for generations. They're 4 years old, I protested. They should be worried about playground games and picture books, not supernatural politics. And they will be, Zane said firmly. Maya, I promise you that Elena and Sophia will have as normal a childhood as possible. But we also need to prepare them for who they are and what they might become. Which brings us to the next issue. Marcus said the girls need proper training for their abilities, and they need it from someone who understands alpha development. Meaning they need their father. Zane said simply, Maya, I know this isn't what you planned when you came to Seattle. I know you're still processing everything that's happened between us. But regardless of our personal situation, Elena and Sophia need me in their lives. The truth of that statement was undeniable. This morning had proven that my daughters faced threats I couldn't handle alone, needed protection and resources I couldn't provide. But accepting Zane's help meant accepting him back into my life in ways that terrified me. What are you proposing? I asked. Marry me, he said without hesitation. The words hit me like lightning, unexpected and overwhelming. What? Marry me, he repeated, moving around his desk to stand in front of me. Not for the girls, not for political convenience, not to solve our security problems. Marry me because I love you. Because I've loved you for years. Because I can't imagine a future that doesn't include you and Elena and Sophia. Zane, I know I hurt you, he continued urgently. I know I made mistakes that cost us years together. But Maya, what we had 6 years ago was real. What we feel for each other now is real. And our daughters deserve to grow up in a home where their parents love each other as much as they love them. I stared at him, trying to process the magnitude of what he was offering. You want to marry me because you love me? I want to marry you because I can't live without you, he said simply. Because watching you with Elena and Sophia, seeing the incredible woman you've become, makes me realize that everything I've accomplished means nothing if I can't share it with you. But what about your world? I asked desperately. The corporate empire, the pack politics, the sophisticated women who understand your social obligations. My world is wherever you and our daughters are, he replied without hesitation. Everything else is just geography. The simple declaration was so honest, so vulnerable, that it cut through years of carefully constructed defenses. This was the man I had fallen in love with, not the billionaire CEO or the alpha leader, but the man who could reduce complex emotions to their essential truth. Maya, Marcus said gently, there's something else you should consider. Legally, the safest way to protect Elena and Sophia is to establish them as legitimate heirs to the Blackstone estate. Marriage would provide them with inheritance rights, pack protection, and legal standing that they can't get any other way. So, it is about politics, I said, disappointment bleeding into my voice. No, Zane said fiercely, taking my hands in his. It's about love. It's about family. It's about building something together that's stronger than anything we could create alone. And if I say no, then I'll respect your decision, he replied quietly. But I'll still be their father, Maya. I'll still protect them and love them and be part of their lives. The only difference is that I'll spend the rest of mine regretting that I couldn't convince the woman I love to take a chance on us. The vulnerability in his voice, the absolute sincerity in his golden eyes, made my heart skip several beats. This was what I had wanted 6 years ago. His love, his commitment, his willingness to fight for what we had together. I'm scared, I admitted quietly. So am I, he said. But Maya, some things are worth being scared for. Before I could respond, the study door burst open and Elena came running in, her face bright with excitement and something else that made my maternal instincts prickle with alarm. Mama, Daddy, I made the flowers grow, she announced proudly. What flowers, sweetheart? I asked, even as I noticed the faint golden glow emanating from her small hands. The ones in the garden. They were all brown and sad, but I touched them and now they're pretty again. Zane and I exchanged glances over her head, both recognizing the implications. Elena's abilities weren't just manifesting. They were evolving, growing stronger with each display of power. That's wonderful, Elena, Zane said gently, kneeling down to her level. But remember what we talked about. Your special abilities are gifts that need to be used carefully. I know, Daddy, but the flowers looked lonely. The innocence in her voice, the pure desire to help and heal, reminded me why I had fallen in love with Zane in the first place. Elena had inherited his strength, but also his essential goodness, his instinct to protect and nurture what was precious. Elena, I said, making a decision that felt like jumping off a cliff. How would you feel if Daddy came to live with us forever? Her face lit up like Christmas morning. Really? He could stay? If that's what everyone wants, I said, looking directly at Zane. I want that more than anything, he said quietly, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. Maya Rodriguez, will you marry me? The question was asked in front of our daughter, in a room filled with the evidence of everything we had overcome together. It wasn't the romantic proposal that fairy tales were made of, but it was real and honest and absolutely perfect. Yes, I said, the words coming out stronger than I felt. Yes, I'll marry you. Elena's squeal of delight was quickly joined by Sophia's as she appeared in the doorway, apparently having followed her sister from whatever mischief they had been planning in the garden. We're going to be a real family? Sophia asked hopefully. We already are a real family, Zane said, gathering all three of us into his arms. We're just going to make it official. As I stood surrounded by the people I loved most in the world, protected by the strength of Zane's embrace, and warmed by our daughter's joy, I realized that some love stories didn't end with happily ever after. They ended with happily ever. Chapter 10. The Perfect Family. 6 months later. The wedding was everything I had never dared to dream of. Intimate, beautiful, and absolutely perfect in its simplicity. We had chosen to hold the ceremony in the garden of the Blackstone estate, surrounded by family and friends who had become an integral part of our new life together. Elena and Sophia served as flower girls, their matching golden dresses perfectly complementing their father's eyes as they scattered rose petals down the white runner. With the kind of serious concentration that only children could bring to important tasks, do you, Zane Alexander Blackstone, take Maya Elena Rodriguez to be your lawfully wedded wife? Asked the officiant, an elderly werewolf elder who had known Zane's family for generations. I do, Zane said, his voice carrying across the garden with absolute certainty. For now and always. And do you, Maya Elena Rodriguez, take Zane Alexander Blackstone to be your lawfully wedded husband? I looked into the golden eyes that had haunted my dreams for 6 years. Seeing love and promise, and the future we were choosing to build together. I do, I said, meaning it with every fiber of my being. As Zane slipped the wedding ring onto my finger, a stunning vintage piece that had belonged to his grandmother, I felt something settle into place inside my chest that had been missing for far too long. By the power vested in me by the moon goddess and the laws of our people, the elder announced, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Zane's kiss was gentle, but thorough. ... A promise of all the nights and days and years we would share together. When we finally broke apart, the cheers from our guests were nearly drowned out by Elena and Sophia's excited squealing. Mama's married to Daddy, Elena announced to anyone within hearing distance. Now we're really a family. The reception that followed was a celebration of everything we had overcome to reach this moment. Marcus gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes, talking about the power of love to heal even the deepest wounds. Mrs. Henderson presented us with a photo album documenting Elena and Sophia's first 6 months at the estate, filled with images of tea parties and horseback riding lessons and bedtime stories read in front of the library fireplace. But it was the moment when Zane took me in his arms for our first dance as husband and wife that made everything else fade away. No regrets, he asked as we swayed together to music that seemed made for this moment. Only that it took us so long to get here, I replied, my hand resting over his heart. We needed the time, he said thoughtfully. I needed to learn how to love without trying to control everything. You needed to discover your own strength. The girls needed to exist before we could appreciate how much they would complete us. Very philosophical for a billionaire CEO, I teased. Very practical for a man who almost lost everything that mattered, he corrected, spinning me gently before pulling me back against his chest. As the evening progressed and our guests gradually departed, I found myself in the children's wing of the house, tucking Elena and Sophia into their beds after a day that had exhausted them completely. Mama, Sophia said sleepily, are you going to have more babies now that you're married to Daddy? The question caught me completely off guard. Would you like more babies? Maybe, Elena said thoughtfully, but only if they're as special as us. Any babies Mama and Daddy have will be exactly as special as they're supposed to be, I said diplomatically. Good, Sophia murmured, already drifting off to sleep. Because being a big sister is an important job. After the girls were asleep, I found Zane on the terrace, overlooking the garden where we had been married just hours earlier. He had changed out of his formal wedding attire into simple jeans and a button-down shirt, looking more relaxed than I had seen him since our reunion. Successful day? I asked, settling into the chair beside his. The most successful day of my life, he replied, reaching for my hand and intertwining our fingers. Maya, there's something I need to tell you. What? I've been thinking about what Sophia said about more babies. His thumb traced across my wedding ring, a gesture that was becoming familiar and comforting. How do you feel about the possibility of expanding our family? The question sent warmth flooding through my chest. Are you asking if I want to have more children with you? I'm asking if you think Elena and Sophia would enjoy being big sisters, he said with a smile that was pure mischief. Eventually. Well, we should probably have some time to ourselves first, he said, pulling me onto his lap with the easy strength that had always made me feel cherished and protected. Maybe a honeymoon, some private moments to reconnect as husband and wife. Is that what you want? I asked, my arms looping around his neck. Time to reconnect? I want everything with you, he said simply. Time, adventure, quiet moments, passionate nights, more children if we're blessed with them. And about 50 years to make up for the time we lost. Only 50 years to start, he said, leaning forward to kiss me with the kind of thorough attention that made my toes curl in my shoes. We can renegotiate after that. As we sat together on the terrace of our home, surrounded by the evidence of the life we had built together, I thought about the strange journey that had brought us to this moment. 6 years ago, I had been a secretary hiding unrequited love behind professional efficiency. 3 days ago, I had been a single mother, running from threats I couldn't understand. Tonight, I was Zane Blackstone's wife, the mother of his children, his partner in every way that mattered. Maya, he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of vulnerability that he had only recently learned to share with me. Are you happy? Happier than I ever thought possible, I replied honestly. Are you? I'm complete, he said simply. For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. From somewhere inside the house, I could hear the faint sound of Elena's laughter as she and Sophia conspired about something that would probably give us gray hair by morning. But there was also the deeper sound of home. A settled peace that came from being surrounded by people who loved you unconditionally. Mr. and Mrs. Blackstone, I said, testing the words. I like the sound of that, Zane replied, his arms tightening around me. So do I. As the stars appeared overhead and the lights of Seattle twinkled in the distance, I realized that some love stories weren't about perfect timing or ideal circumstances. They were about choosing to fight for what mattered. Even when the odds seemed impossible, They were about learning that love wasn't weakness. It was the strongest force in the universe, capable of healing wounds that seemed too deep to mend, and building families that were stronger than any individual could be alone. Most of all, they were about understanding that happily ever after wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. The first day of the rest of your life with the person who made every day worth living. And ours was just getting started. Thank you for listening to Maya and Zane's incredible journey from hidden love to perfect family. Their story proves that sometimes the best things in life are worth waiting for and worth fighting for when the time is right. I hope this passionate tale of secret babies, second chances, and billionaire alpha love captured your heart as much as it did mine. Remember, beautiful souls, true love is patient, but it's also brave enough to claim what belongs to it. Share your thoughts about Maya's transformation from secretary to Luna. Have you ever had to choose between protecting your heart and fighting for love? Your stories inspire me. If you enjoyed listening to this story, please hit the like button, share it with someone who'd love this, and subscribe to Nightbond Narratives, and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. Tell me in the comments below which part of the world you are watching from. Also tell me which part of the story you like the most.